Hello and welcome. This is going to be a little introduction video to Japanese PFC guns. Now, you may know of Japan's prowess in airsoft guns, but what exactly is a PFC gun? At its core, it is a cap gun, and I'm sure many of you, your parents, your grandparents have fond memories of playing with old Wild West little cap guns in your backyard. But PFC guns, or plug fire cartridge, plug fire cap guns, are much more than dollar store toys. These things can be capable of full and semi-automatic blowback operation, often are licensed or branded by the real firearms manufacturer, and are virtually one-to-one replicas of the real deal. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the historical context of Japan and its relationship to firearms in the aftermath of World War II. I know that seems a little extreme, but it's a very important piece of the puzzle. So, after World War II, Japan had obviously suffered immensely and had surrendered to the United States, and its military was completely disarmed. From 1945 to 1952, Japan was then under American occupation administration in a bit of a unique way. Allied soldiers were stationed in Japan, but Japan's government was allowed to continue to officially govern Japan, obviously under Allied influence. In 1958, the Firearm and Sword Possession Control Law was passed by the Japanese government, which was enacted to provide safety regulations necessary for the prevention and harm related to possession and use of firearms and swords. That's a rough translation. This greatly prohibited the ownership, sale, import, and export of firearms in Japan and completely banned handguns. Firearm ownership in Japan remains extremely low and tightly controlled under this act and its revisions over the years. Okay, so now that we've set a basic landscape for firearms culture in Japan, here comes a couple early groups, like the Japan Model Gun Collection Association, which later be renamed the Model Gun Corporation, or MGC. Keep that name in mind. So if you're a firearms enthusiast in Japan, you're pretty much screwed in terms of actual firearms. So, the Japan Model Gun Collection Association started importing basic cap guns in the late 50s, mainly from America, mainly for kids, and selling them on the Japanese market. Some other important groups doing this were the Nakata and Airha stores. I'm sure I butchered that pronunciation. Now, as the 60s rolled around, these companies started to modify these standard, little toy-like cap guns to give them a bit more realism. Surface finishes were upgraded, and between 1960 and 1961, what is at this point renamed the Model Gun Corporation, MGC, introduces a modified cap revolver that uses separate loadable cartridges in the cylinder to hold the caps. So instead of just putting some little plastic caps in a one-piece cylinder, you put the caps in little fake cartridges and load them individually into the chamber. So, now, from here, they and some other aforementioned companies start producing and selling their own designs that were much more faithful to their real-life counterparts, including quick action guns that would cycle the slide and eject shells using mechanical trigger linkage. Not dissimilar to the cheap little blowback things you find on Amazon today. Now, the PFC gun was invented in 1968 by MGC and revolutionized the model gun landscape in Japan. These used paper caps and later plastic caps in each cartridge to provide a bang, sound, smoke, and, most importantly, to cycle the action. Early open types simply had a cap stuck in a hollow tube, and it would interact with the metal detonator, which is part of the plug in the barrel, and it would just sit up against that. When you'd fire it, it would push against that, go off, and it would force the slide back simply because the detonator pin would be in the way and would let pressure collect in the cartridge and force it back. Later types would use a piston system where the piston would be stopped by the detonator pin, and then the kinetic energy would be transferred into the rearward motion of the cartridge and the slide from the piston pushing against the detonator. There are many different variations in this basic design, but the main two are separated into side fire and center fire systems. Earlier PFC guns had a quote-unquote firing block that would push the entire cartridge forward in the chamber to detonate the cap. Later models would use the more realistic center fire design, in which a firing pin strikes a moving dummy primer forward to detonate the cap. This design is the core of any semi-automatic PFC gun. Of course, bolt-action, revolvers, and pump-action replicas also exist, albeit using different cartridge designs for simplicity. Another thing to keep in mind is the material. Early PFC guns were made of metal, often cast, but a revision to the Firearm and Sword Possession Control Law in 1977 forced manufacturers to switch to mainly plastic construction. These plastic models make up the majority of PFC guns and are generally more accurate, if less robust, replicas than the early full metal ones. In the mid-80s, the introduction of airsoft guns severely impacted the model gun market, and many manufacturers went out of business or shifted their focus to airsoft. So PFC guns are much less common than airsoft guns nowadays. They were also used in film as a safer alternative to blanks. Some brands that are still around, or newer brands, include Kraft Apple Works, CAW, Marushin, which still makes airsoft guns as well, Tanyo Koba, CMC, and Tanaka. And Red Wolf Airsoft and eBay are the places I've gotten mine off of. It's important to keep in mind the care and condition of these guns. The caps leave behind corrosive salts that will rust and damage metal parts, so it's important to immediately clean the gun and its cartridges after every firing session. And some of these are much older and will have some corrosion. You should also keep everything running smoothly with silicone oil or silicone grease. So a little bit of TLC is usually needed before using them. Replacement parts are hard to come by, so don't abuse your guns too much. Finally, obviously, never brandish these in public spaces, don't point these at people, and just generally be safe and have fun. So that's pretty much it. That's just a little quick crash course on Japanese model guns. These things are pretty cool. They have a pretty dedicated small community outside of Japan. There's many good resources, I'm sure, in Japanese, but in English there is precious few. I can recommend MP40 Model Guns Forum. In the UK, there's quite a bit of, relative to in the US, model gun shops. Quite a bit, meaning like probably less than 10. And these are just a really cool piece of Japanese firearm history, of model gun history, of airsoft history. A lot of these manufacturers then shifted to airsoft. They got their start in model guns. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I got for you. Thanks for watching.